Coming up, breaking news this lunchtime. Parliament's sleaze watchdog opens an investigation into the Prime Minister. Campaigners in the world of horse racing clash over safety at the Grand National. And why park bosses have rebranded the Brecon Beacons. The spring of discontent, why waiting lists could worsen if the NHS disputes aren't resolved soon. The Prime Minister admitted today it will be more challenging to bring record waiting times down, while the disputes over pay and patient safety continue.
It's really important to me that we cut NHS waiting lists. Of course, industrial action makes that more challenging, but we're going to keep going at it because it's important to the country.
We'll have the latest on the Prime Minister's response to the strikes and a developing story this lunchtime as an investigation opens into Rishi Sunak by Parliament's standards watchdog. Also ahead. The Russian ambassador is summoned to the Foreign Office after a Russian-British Kremlin critic is jailed in Moscow. Grand national deaths. The racing world and animal rights campaigners clash over horse safety. And why national park bosses have rebranded the Brecon Beacons with the help of a Welsh star.
Banau Brycheiniog, an old name for a new way to be. A name from our past to take us into our future.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. The doctor will see you now, or maybe not quite yet. The Prime Minister admitted this morning that cutting NHS waiting times will be more challenging given the ongoing disputes over pay and patient safety within the health service in England. Rishi Sunak was responding to the Royal College of Nursing's latest strike dates after the RCN's General Secretary Pat Cullen warned the industrial action could go on until Christmas. Here's our political correspondent, Shihab Khan.
No way! They talked to the government, then went on strike. They talked again, and now they'll be striking again. Nurses have turned down the government's latest pay offer, and there will now be a huge escalation in their walkout. Today, the Prime Minister took stock of the impact it's having.
There has been more money put on the table, significant more money. And in fact, that was recognised by the unions, in particular by the leadership of the nurses union, the RCN, at the time that we announced the agreement. It's really important to me that we cut NHS waiting lists. Of course, industrial action makes that more challenging, but we're going to keep going at it because it's important to the country.
Royal College of Nursing members felt the government's 5% pay offer with a one-off additional payment didn't go far enough and have vowed to return to the picket line. The next walkout will be 3 days long, starting from 8 p.m. on the 30th of April until the 2nd of May. This time, for the first time, the strikes will include nurses from critical care departments, including accident and emergency, intensive care and cancer units.
This is not about point scoring. This is not about who can be the smartest person in the class. This is about trying to take the NHS back from the brink. That's what our nursing staff are trying to do. We need to fill the 47,000 vacant nursing posts. We won't do that unless we pay these nurses decently. But they need to leave on the table what this government put on last month. Don't take anything off and add to it.
Unions are warning strikes could go on until Christmas. For those like Jamie Hale, who requires ongoing procedures to live comfortably, that's a huge worry. His previous operation was cancelled because of the disruption, and he's worried further walkouts will impact his care.
I don't want to be an increasing discomfort, and I know that if the strikes continue and things get delayed further and further, that will be more and more difficult. But at the same time, the impact of not having a funded NHS on my health has also been significant. The waiting lists have gotten longer and longer for treatments, for appointments.
What do we want? Jamie, like the rest of us, will be keeping an eye on the developments, but for now, it looks like both sides are digging in.
In the last hour, the Parliament Standards Watchdog has announced it's opened an investigation into Rishi Sunak over a possible failure to declare an interest. Shihab joins me now from Westminster. Shihab, what is this breaking news story all about?
Well, this relates to declarations that MPs and ministers are supposed to make in an attempt to avoid any potential conflicts of interest. This one specifically relates to the Prime Minister's wife, Akshata Murthy, and a shareholding she has in a childcare company. Now, the reason that's now being looked into is because there are allegations that that childcare company benefited directly from policies that were announced in the most recent budget. Now, the Prime Minister has been asked about this before, and he has always been insistent that he has declared this interest in the right and proper way. He says he engaged directly with the Cabinet Office about this. Now, I've spoken to Number 10 about it this lunchtime. That's the line that they're sticking with. That's exactly what's happened. So why is this coming up now? Well, we don't actually have an explanation because it is such a developing story for why exactly at this moment in time it is being looked into. What I can tell you is that a Downing Street source tells me that the Prime Minister did not refer himself. They have, however, issued a statement. In that statement, they say they are happy to work with the Commissioner directly with this investigation to ensure that they can outline that nothing has gone wrong here, that they have declared, and the Prime Minister has declared this in the full and proper way. What the Commissioner will be doing from this moment onwards will be looking to determine whether or not the letter of the law has been followed completely. Now, a number of MPs have been investigated by the Commissioner in the past and have been cleared, so we'll have to wait and see what that investigation concludes before we come to any conclusion ourselves.
Shihab Khan, thank you very much. Thank you. Racing bosses have defended the Grand National after 3 horses died at Aintree last week. The RSPCA has called for safety reforms to the event, but one trainer whose horse Hill 16 fell at the first fence said ignorant animal rights protesters are to blame for his horse's death after the group Animal Rising caused a delay to the race. Those protesters told ITV News Today their campaign will go on. Ian Woods has our report.
This is Hill 16 just before the start of the Grand National, as other horses were lining up ready for the off. When the race did get underway, 14 minutes late, it was one of several fallers at the first fence. Other horses weren't hurt, but Hill 16 had to be euthanised because of its injuries.
And also down at the first is Hill 16. They're going over fence number 2, and the leader there was Cocoa Beach.
Now the horse's trainer says the protests, which caused disruption and delay, broke the normal race day routine, and it led to the animals becoming unsettled.
In the last 9 years, I think there's been an average of under 2 fallers at the first 2 fences, and this year there were 7. And I just feel that it speaks for what these so-called animal lovers, because they did no favours to any of the animals yesterday, any of the horses running, they caused them a lot of problems.
Under what power is arresting her, sir?
Claudia Pena Rojas was one of the 118 people arrested at Aintree. She says they want to reopen the debate about the ethics of horse racing.
Hill 16, who died on the day that we were there at Aintree, was the 50th horse to die this year in British horse racing. And I think people go because they're seeking this connection with animals. They're there because they love them. But we need to find ways that we can have this connection with them in a way that doesn't harm them.
As they go out on their second circuit.
By the time the runners were on the second lap of the circuit, they had to bypass the fence where Hill 16 was being attended by vets. 2 other horses died at the course in earlier races. The RSPCA has called on the British Horse Racing Authority to carry out a review into the size of the Grand National field. 39 horses started the race, 17 finished, including the winner, Korak Rambler. The BHA says it and the management at Aintree will analyse the race in what they call painstaking detail. They condemned what they described as the reckless and potentially harmful actions of the protesters. Ian Woods, ITV News.
Police officers in America say they need people to come forward with information about a mass shooting in Alabama at a 16-year-old's birthday party. 4 people were killed on Saturday, including a high school football star. But 2 days on, there are still many unanswered questions about the attack. Police haven't named a suspect or said what happened to the shooter. Charlie Frost on what we know so far.
May we be at peace. No.
Dozens gathered in Dadeville, the small rural city in Alabama, tight-knit and now in mourning. It was here that shots were fired, a downtown dance studio. On Saturday night, a 16th birthday party was taking place.
He was a good person. You weren't there last night, right? I was standing right beside him.
Among the 4 victims was star athlete Phil Dowdall. He was due to graduate high school next month before starting an American football scholarship at Jacksonville State University. It's believed it was his sister's sweet 16th party.
4 lives were lost in the tragic event that occurred here in Dadeville. As far as the injuries, there are 28 individuals that were injured during the course of the incident. Some of those injuries are critical.
But while police spoke of the victims, they shared very little detail about a possible suspect and if they too had died in the shooting or if they were in custody. It brings the number of mass shootings in America to a grim total of more than 160 so far this year. President Biden condemning the attack and renewing his calls for tougher gun laws. But Alabama is known to be a state on the side of protecting citizens' rights to own guns.
And I'm sick of those D.C. politicians.
Me too. That's why I like Governor Ivey.
She is honest.
It's Republican Governor Kay Ivey, a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, as can be seen in this campaign video. She wrote on Twitter she was grieving with the people of Dadeville, and violent crime has no place in Alabama. The people of this small city now wait for answers as they come to terms with the needless loss of 4 lives. Charlie Frost, ITV News.
The UK has demanded the release of a man sentenced to 25 years in prison in Moscow after he was charged with treason for criticising Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza is a Russian-British national who has twice survived being poisoned. The Russian ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office over calls he didn't get a fair trial. Sajal Karia is at the Foreign Office. What more, Sajal, do we know about this man?
Well, as you say, Vladimir Kara-Murza is a dual British-Russian national. He is an outspoken Kremlin critic, and today he's been sentenced to 25 years by a Moscow court after it found him guilty of treason and other offences that he completely denies. He has spent years speaking out against President Putin, even lobbying Western governments to impose sanctions on Russia for purported human rights violations. These charges, though, are partly based on a speech he gave in the US last year, where he said Russia was committing war crimes in Ukraine, those claims that have been independently documented but disputed by Russian investigators. His sentence is being widely condemned, the US saying today it was an attempt to silence dissent.
It has then the makings of a big diplomatic row between the UK and Russia.
Yes, that's right. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has summoned the Russian ambassador. And in a statement, Mr. Cleverly said Russia's lack of commitment to protecting fundamental human rights, including freedom of expression, is alarming.
Sajal Karia, thank you. A new mobile alert system being tested this weekend could eventually warn us of terror attacks and possible nuclear attacks, the government has said this lunchtime. It'll be used first for severe weather warnings, but may be extended in the future. Millions of mobile phones will emit a loud alarm and vibrate at 3 o'clock this Sunday as a trial run. The Foreign Secretary has called for an immediate end to the fierce fighting in Sudan, which has left at least 100 people dead. James Cleverly said his first priority is for the British nationals who remain in the country. Following gun battles between parliamentary groups and the army, both claim to control strategic locations in the capital, Khartoum. Chloe Keedy has the latest.
It was a second sleepless night for the city of Khartoum. In the darkness, the seemingly never-ending crackle of gunfire, punctuated only by the rumble of explosions. The morning light brought little comfort as terrified residents watched on helplessly, many of them trapped inside their homes. They're caught in the middle of a bloody fight between the Sudanese army and a rival paramilitary group. As fighter jets zoom through the skies over their heads, on the ground, people are just trying to survive.
It is the second day here in Khartoum and we do not have water here in Khartoum. We are also afraid of running short of our food supplies here in Kober because all markets are closed.
The fighting started on Saturday morning, but it's the result of long-running tensions between rival military groups over how Sudan should transition to civilian rule. Thousands of miles away at the G7 summit in Japan, the UK's Foreign Secretary and his US counterpart urged the country's generals to stop the violence immediately.
We call upon them to put peace first, to bring an end to the fighting, to get back to negotiations. That's what the people of Sudan want. That's what the people of Sudan deserve.
There was a brief ceasefire yesterday to allow injured people to be evacuated, although it isn't clear whether the two sides actually stuck to it.
Already today we have reports about dozens of people who died, and this number will continue to grow if the first responders cannot carry out their work, if hospitals cannot be resupplied.
Both sides are claiming key victories and to have the upper hand in this struggle. The losers are those who are caught in the middle, desperately willing the fighting to stop. Chloe Keedy, ITV News.
In the next half an hour, Elon Musk's company SpaceX is hoping to launch the most powerful rocket ever into space. From a launch pad in Texas, the rocket named Starship is expected to lift off and complete only a partial orbit of the Earth before it's due to splash down again near Hawaii. NASA already plans to use Starship to ferry humans to the surface of the moon. However, Mr. Musk has said one day he hopes it'll help establish a human settlement on Mars. Today's flight is without any crew. 145 million people have seen The Phantom of the Opera around the world, but theatregoers will no longer be able to see it in New York. The Andrew Lloyd Webber musical has been a fixture on Broadway since 1988, its longest-running show. But last night, the final curtain came down on the production. Lord Lloyd Webber was there and paid tribute to his late son on stage. Natalia Hockera on the cheers and tears.
A final curtain call for Broadway's longest-running musical. After more than 35 years and almost 40,000 performances, Phantom of the Opera is closing in New York. To rapturous standing ovations, the cast and crew took their final bows on stage last night. And from the show's creator, Andrew Lloyd Webber, a touching tribute to his beloved son.
I would like to start, because I haven't really prepared anything, I hope you won't mind if I dedicate this performance to my son.
Last month, Nick Lloyd Webber died from gastric cancer at the age of 43. His father said he grew up listening to the Phantom of the Opera score as he composed it. The Phantom of the Opera tells the story of a composer who haunts the Paris Opera House and falls in love with a young soprano, Christine. It debuted in London in 1986, with Sarah Brightman taking a leading role.
It's always lovely to be involved with something from inception and to see how it pans out, and especially working with the producer who worked a lot of the pieces around what my voice did, and so it's very, very personal to me.
While the show weathered recessions and audience shifts, ticket sales never recovered after COVID lockdowns. But it went out with a bang. It was the highest grossing Broadway show for the past 12 weeks. And despite ending with confetti bursting from its famous chandelier, Andrew Lloyd Webber hinted that it may one day return to a New York stage. Natalia Hockera, ITV News.
Finally, the rebranding exercise for the Brecon Beacons, the Welsh National Park, from today has a new Welsh name, Banau Brycheiniog. The national park bosses say the time is right for change on its 66th anniversary and have enlisted a Welsh star with a serious message to explain why. Here's Sangeeta Kandola.
It's a big branding day for the beautiful Brecon Beacons as it goes back to its roots. The national park's lush landscape in Wales has got a new name. Well, an old one actually. Its original name.
Banau Brycheiniog, an old name for a new way to be. A name from our past to take us into our future.
Welsh actor Michael Sheen has the name down to a T in a new promotional video to mark the occasion. Park authorities say the major rebranding is aimed at promoting and making more accessible the Welsh language and culture, and that is critical.
I think it's all part of our local distinctiveness, isn't it? We are in Wales. We're in a Welsh-speaking part of Wales, especially in the west of the national park, and so it's fully appropriate that we should be Banau Brycheiniog.
There is, however, a more serious side to the newly renamed Brecon Beacons, or Banau Brycheiniog. The Park Authority has changed the name to coincide with a long-term plan to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss.
Much stronger pressures on the national park. For example, this time last year it was very hot and dry and we had massive fires on the mountain, and they are devastating to the whole ecology of the mountain.
The new plan will attempt to restore damaged land and reverse declines in wildlife species across the park by 2030.
This plan launch is a sign, and the new brand is a sign of a new authority, really looking to the future and imagining the very positive role that the national park can play in the communities that it serves. I really hope this plan is going to put us on the map.
Today's name change is fitting on the 66th anniversary of the national park, where an old Welsh name is being embraced alongside improving the environment for the future. Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
Mary's here at 6:30 from me. Bye-bye.
There'll be some light cloud early on today, but by lunchtime it will almost certainly clear. Heinz Seriously Good Mayonnaise sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. Hope you had a lovely weekend as we start a brand new week, and as the children head back to school, of course, the weather starts to improve. It's drier, warmer and more settled over the next few days. Lovely sunshine across eastern parts first thing this morning, and the sunshine is going to continue for you and for eastern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well into this afternoon. Elsewhere, rather more cloud around, but we are expecting to this break in places, so sunny spells poking through at times, and it's quite warm for some as well. Temperatures at best around 18 degrees, but western Scotland could actually achieve an isolated 20 degrees today, so that will feel positively balmy. As we look ahead to this evening and overnight, that clear slice is going to continue drifting westwards. So for you, it is going to be a little bit chillier under the thicker cloud, less so misty and murky in places. Then jumping ahead to Tuesday, early cloud clearing, fine, dry and sunny, a little bit breezy. See you later.
Heinz Seriously Good Mayonnaise sponsors ITV National Weather.